Warning: some material discussed in this video may not be suitable for sensitive viewers. On screen is a list of content warnings for sensitive topics covered in this video. Viewer discretion is highly advised. Also, as usual, please do not harass anyone who I talk about in this video. Anyways, the video shall begin now. Hi-oh, Bracket here. This has been something I've meant to express for many months, at least since autumn. There's been mentions through community posts, but I've slept on the idea of this video for too long. This is about my rant on Mr. Blocky, a project which I now consider one of my worst missteps. While I did give a short apology at the start of my latest video on Carno Productions, I need to discuss this subject with more information. Simply put, I severely mishandled both of these topics, in ways I have zero excuses for. While I want to put more emphasis on my Blocky related failings since that's the mark I left behind for everyone to witness, I also want to express my guilt in how the Carno video was originally planned to be. This video will go into detail regarding my thought process behind both, addressing the flaws and how I handled them. The Blocky versus the Boxies rant, putting it kindly, was a very biased and bitter attempt at criticizing Mr. Blocky. While in places I had decent reason to be upset with him, most areas I either dramatized or was stretching points to make Blocky appear more guilty or like a malicious drama farmer, including some business which A, I should have stayed out of, and B, had little relevance towards his beef with the package reviewer. That guy I would get defensive over. To a fault. I looked like a dork, and not the cool kind, rather the suck-up type. Even with a few complaints directed at him, those were still vague at best and otherwise too generous. My whole judgment was cloudy, resulting in an unpleasant experience on all fronts. One major confession is that I wasn't familiar with Mr. Blocky prior to his YouTube abomination on the package reviewer. My only previous exposure was his first shitpost call-out against Box from a year earlier, and bits from his Carno rant released months after. Neither gave me a positive impression, but they were ignorable. The former of which felt like it was asking for backlash anyway, since all it did was place guilt on Box for being subscribed to Pappy Animate, who he saw as a producer of quote-unquote Go Animate Lolicon garbage. He didn't elaborate on why until the dedicated rant came out in March 2024. And even then, his only real point was it supposedly contradicting his stance against other artists Box called pedos such as Meegzo3 and someone now known as Andrew. While I disliked how he expressed this problem, it wasn't like this point would have been bad on principle. Pappy's videos including sexual themes on canonically underage characters would reasonably raise some eyebrows for their sus factor. Even with their absurd and unserious nature, it's fair to question it. Pappy's own defense he wrote in a community post only adds fuel to that fire. There's also Box's inconsistent values with this exact subject, which Blocky does have a point about. The split between the Andrew and Tana Sweet videos was only a year and a half, and yet Box gave the one who made kink edits out of real kid actors more grace than another gross individual who he smited for similar or less. My main issues boil down to three main factors. The first being a wide array of loaded assumptions against Box and treating them as truth. This applied to the support of Pappy, which gave heavy implications of enabling pedophilia, but also insisting he knew exactly how Box acts compared to his public persona, mostly applying to his biased moral compass, but this includes his vague status regarding old videos. That ties into my second point, trying to hold up videos such as the Meeks rant, which was over 6 years old by then, to act like they're relevant today, if for no other reason than the virtue of false pedo allegations Box put on a then 14-year-old and later double standards. And judging by how obsessed Blocky got with spreading this belief on any package reviewer related post on Twitter, it connects with my third main issue, his uptight and jerk-ass presence. Beyond his insight on Box being faulty, he generally sounded apathetic and disrespectful towards them, including factors he has little to no control over like his followers. Even the points I would otherwise agree with him on, like the double standards, were harmed as a result. Overall, I stick by a majority of my complaints in context to this situation. But with all that being said, my own lack of insight from Blocky during production is a glaring flaw in itself, and I'd also fall into similar problems to his during it. This proved true during my concluding thoughts, where I directly told viewers not to engage with Blocky acting like he was complete scum. Sure, the guy's a dickhole who prides himself on that trait, but dehumanizing him like that feels wrong. Besides, I can't call him actively malicious, rather just a bit obsessive in niche dramas and a jerk at times. It helps that I've actually discussed my video among other things with Blocky directly after it released, which has built a rational understanding. While I don't fully blame myself for initially refusing to engage aware of his recent behavior, I do apologize for letting my feelings overhype the issue to where I became dismissive. It doesn't help when I barely look further into his other rants, so I judged him mostly off how he handled Boxy shit. Not really fair when your thoughts are isolated to just that. My only excuse was that partway during production, Blocky's videos were all set to private, meaning further research on those would be more difficult. Even then, I had plenty of time to look deeper into his work, especially since by the time that happened, the script was largely done. This lack of awareness self-awareness also made me gullible enough to fall for his Twitter imposter, with again the only excuse being that Blocky didn't make it clear until later. Even then, the fact I continued focusing on this for the video because I originally thought it was eerily accurate was beyond stupid. Looking back, the writing style isn't even close to matching Blocky's own. Even the bad qualities which I did notice from the real one were cartoonishly amplified by the fake. Eerily accurate, my booty cheeks. That's what happens when you fail to do your homework. And while I acknowledge this being a fake in the video, I still kept bringing up that worrying doublespeak groomer tweet as if that was important, portraying the real Blocky as if he also behaves similarly. Can confirm that's not the case, and if I didn't guess that up, it would have been more honest. I had no ill intent, but when you make a claim that bold, people will undoubtedly take it to extremes. All that for what? Well, the reason behind this factors into what I consider the video's worst element. I spent a significant portion of my rant, about 30% of it, covering a once thought to be wrapped up conflict from 2022. Blocky incidentally brought this back to relevancy, which got on my nerves, partially due to this contradicting his own false allegations point. Said drama revolved around two members in Box's community, namely Cool Speedy Josh, allegedly grooming and flirting with a 12 to 13-year-old member by the name of Grimes, then known as Quonkin. Box and others in his community would release call-out videos against him in mid-2022, which brought claims of him being a manipulator, spamming and harassing Boxies, to even doxing a few. What's most relevant here is the stuff against Josh, as Blocky singled that part out. Like other related things, he tied this to Box's double standards and favoritism. The heavy nature of this situation and little context provided by Blocky would necessitate that section needing more detail. This also being a scenario where proof of grooming was missing and negative impressions from those behind the narrative, including the victim, made me skeptical. Shamefully, my tone even from just the written word went into angry venting territory, directed at a then 13-year-old's actions. Now yes, some of what he did was fucked up, especially wishing Boxies get groomed as a form of karma. But let's be real, should we expect someone who was literally a child to handle serious, traumatic issues with a hint of rationality? Fuck no, that's an inhuman standard. This is something I, and nearly every other figure involved in calling out Grimes, failed on. Especially so when much of this was written destructively like their own words against Boxies, when most involved are, or nearly were, adults who should know better. It boiled down to shit talking, so we can only blame ourselves for making it worse. It really isn't helping that for Box's video, he would essentially victim blame and invalidate Grimes because according to them, he flirted with Josh first. A troublesome point in itself, but worse in context to Grimes likely being only 12 then. All fault should go to the older party if what happened is true, especially when Josh was 17 and the gap wouldn't rule out claims of pedophilia. Box failed to clarify that Josh wasn't told his age, even though he did for the other accused, Albert. I can't blame Blocky for assuming something was up when it was presented so terribly. This is also something I really should have criticized Box for originally, as all I said against it previously was that Josh doing the same wouldn't be excusable either way. Even if I'm still not confident about Grimes' claims against Josh, you have the right to not believe Josh was innocent. Even if not predation, any actions he may have done are still open to scrutiny. I don't want to deny any trauma that Grimes has relating to these events. After all, it's generally considered rude if you were to say such a thing if they were recovering from a breakup or someone's loss. All that can be said is that evidence is lacking from both parties to conclude anything, so this should be viewed as not much more than a he said she said case unless undeniable proof surfaces. And considering most alleged examples of this behavior were in VCs, that's very unlikely to surface. To give some credit to Grimes, I can speak confidently that he is a victim of harassment. Criticizing him harshly like I did is one thing, but hyper-focusing on a dumb kid is all sorts of creepy. Even if it's alleged that he's done the same to them and they can argue self-defense, some within the box huggers push the boundaries in my eyes. I plead guilt in being part of such investigations against him. Following Box's short video on Grimes and Will G in May 2022, a 45-minute long collaborative rant hosted by the Letterboxd critic would release at the start of July that year. The video itself is no longer public, but it did serve as a primary source of evidence for my claims. Some of the info I shared, like him sending scat to certain Boxies under the alias Ass Lover, is potentially false. Beyond that, continued discussions in private would occur which I was present for. I was pissed by the actions Grimes and others involved supposedly did, but I wanted to remain level-headed for these discussions. While I can't possibly recount everything, some did take this too far. Even at the time I felt some were acting irresponsibly. Grimes may have been a pest and a liar, but I'm sorry, he was not worth draining this much energy on. Attacking and lying about him is unacceptable and makes his antagonism on Boxies look justified. This was all towards someone who's still far from mature maturity. He's clearly in a bad mental place as is, so this should be handled with more sensitivity. I apologize for failing to live up to that throughout this, and I hope the others recognize how worthless and despicable this all was. My video also added an ally of his, Will G, including some claims against him. While not as egregious as the Grimes venting, I failed to provide evidence for nearly all of my claims against Will, without even calling most of them allegations. There wasn't much in terms of coverage to prove most of these at the time. Even stuff like Will sending Josh Pornhub links through sock accounts which have been archived is near impossible to prove it was actually him, even with the information that he does use sock puppets. However, I also have issues trusting him, so I won't disregard this claim completely. Whichever case, he's clearly obsessed against Josh and has been for almost 5 years. He's also done videos on related figures like the Litterbox Critic and even myself.
Please forgive me.
Josh released a call-out video giving out his side, although it has been repeatedly taken down. It's likely due to showing claims relating to a so-called Patreon face leak. Will said that the Patreon the image came from was an imposter. He also claimed Josh hacked a miner's webcam to retrieve said image. Take that claim for what you will. Regardless, Josh didn't blur out said face in his video at first. With that, and his angry conclusion, criticism for this video is valid. But to tie this back to the Grimes issue, due to how Will G was framed as a stalker and a liar in my video, it hinted disgust with Grimes for even choosing to side with him. After all, I did claim he had to have known of Will G's grudge and sided out of common enemy syndrome. But thinking about this under less foggy lenses, Grimes' decision would make total sense. As far as I know, Will G was the only one speaking out against Josh during this time. Even if he is dishonest and Grimes probably knew that, should I have blamed the literal kid and potential victim of his for siding with the guy? No, I shouldn't have. That's the dictionary definition of victim blaming. Who else was he supposed to go to other than the police? If you think others around you are invalidating and somebody like Will G at least gave you more respect, this allyship makes reasonable sense. Besides, the few people who were this vocal against Will G also had biases or were followers of Josh's narrative, who Grimes simply doesn't trust. This isn't me saying Grimes' choice was the right one to make, but if anyone were to receive the brunt of scrutiny, it should be with Will G the adult, and not the kid who so happens to enable him within reason. This ugly narrative Boxies and I promoted, which put just as much emphasis on Grimes and this Will G feud, was grossly irresponsible, and I regret promoting it there. It doesn't help either when I mentioned their potential involvement in a server raid Blocky was also part of. I mentioned just before the conclusion that both Will G and Grimes were suspected to be involved using alt accounts. I did not treat such claims as if they were factual. However, people will see these claims and blindly believe that is a fact, given I already decried both by that point. For Will G, I even said he had a history of doing this behavior. While I did mention this in my pinned comment, which served to correct some misinformation, I should repeat this here. Grimes has stated he had no involvement in this raid in a response video directed towards me.
These little schizos think I'm going around entering their servers, which, by the way, I'm not. I'm too busy being in a romantic relationship and goofing around in the fucking country ball community to do that.
Which, even with my skepticism for many of his claims, is one I believe. Will G's involvement has yet to be confirmed beyond uploading a video recorded by Blocky. So far, only one other person besides Blocky has confessed taking part, and even then, they joined out of curiosity. Regardless, name dropping was already a stupid move on my part when the only relevant party was Blocky. The fact I also highlighted Grimes' response at all was also unnecessary and probably insensitive. If anything, what Kenster said about him should be criticized, like saying he should have stayed in an asylum. Yeah, that shit isn't helping. As for other poorly thought out statements, that's a problem my Blocky video also had in spades during the Grimes portion. I have a bad tendency to insert barely relevant rants within rants to try making bold, wider statements. In this case, it was regarding my views on minors getting away with terrible stuff due to their age and the fact they shouldn't be in the business of hunting predators, at least through direct interaction. While my statements still partially hold up, it was an inappropriate time for it. Save that discussion for another day. And as for the rant near the end where I basically shamed those who rely on so-called opportunists for protection, which I applied to both Blocky and Will G, that only worsens my previous point with invalidating victims. Don't blame the desperate solely because they fall for a grifter, likely unknowingly, unless you can confirm they're also lying about shit. Even so, the grifter's the worst one more often than not, since they would be more influential and may take advantage of the victim and the public's trust. If anything, that was a key reason why I was so upset with Blocky, albeit with a questionable moral compass which put blame on all sides. other than Box apparently. Due to my biases, I couldn't rationalize Blocky taking the words of either Grime or Will G seriously, without being manipulated or pressured into it, foolishly believing Blocky was a victim to their narrative. Yes, my brain was really that fogged up. I had no good reason to suspect, let alone confirm, that Blocky was coerced by anyone in any way. In his own video, he barely validated the claims against Josh, as Box provided little context.
Now we aren't given enough context for a lot of these allegations in the video to say one way or the other, so I won't comment on the validity. However, I will comment about the very end. The part where his friend, Josh, is accused of grooming a 13-year-old at 17.
Even in the follow-up directed at Josh, which was less forgiving, he never insisted that the grooming claims were true.
Oh my god. Josh, you fucking idiot. You could have looked so innocent had you not said this.
I got notified about Guankin's crush on me was unironic.
At first, I didn't mind it since I thought they said ironic.
Ah yes. According to Josh, a kid flirting with you is okay as long as it's just a joke, bro.
Unfortunately, my panic button went into overdrive, so I took this too dramatically. I mean, sure, Blocky did interpret Josh's comment literally, but with how skeptical he already was, and Josh's statement carrying unfortunate implications, he was totally within reason to be suspect. When you say things which implied the crush was fine, provided it was a joke, that doesn't help your case. Does it make you guilty? No, but it does give off questionable vibes at least. That's pretty much what Blocky said, and I doubt he was fed any misleading info by the victim or their defender to think this way. So yeah, my whole point about opportunist ranters need not apply. This issue of tacking on heavy social critiques unwisely was even a problem my Carno response was about to have. One portion I scrapped was a moment where I spent nearly 5 minutes venting about predator hunter culture. Again. This time in context as somebody who Carno tried to expose, engaging in possibly promoting minors to interact with alleged groomers and predators for dunking purposes, putting them in potential danger. This would have been placed partway through my response to Carno's atrocious video where he pleads for sympathy and projects onto others. Ignoring possible victim invalidation, it would have at least been wildly off topic. That exact social position was originally going to be more relevant for my Carno video. The original plan was to not only cover his video, but also a response to it done by the critic YouTuber Sav. Her own words about the subject poisoned the well, insisting he was factually a child predator and making some death threats at him. Even without that, her comments were chock full of wild affirmations, pearl clutching, ad hominem, and moral hypocrisy. Those issues led me to treat her more harshly since I found her behavior and means of exposing creeps to be both reckless and vengeful. Also, like Blocky, Sav left a bad early impression with her interactions. In Sav's first response against Carno, she went on a tangent about the package reviewer and Cool Speedy Josh, which echoed many of the points from Blocky's video. This was already kind of frustrating when it sounded like she was playing favoritism for him, but by the end of this, I myself ended up in the crosshairs as one of those shitty people. And I'm not even sure who to blame for that since Carno promoted my Blocky rant in his stupid ass video.
Side note, please watch this video. It's a super great video.
No, it's not. It stunk. But anyways, here's what Sav's 2 cents were about me and that specific video.
You know, I was gonna say this. The whole two birds flock a feather with this situation is an understatement. He's flocking with fucking everybody. Because it seems like Carno has a really bad pattern with associating with really shitty people and sticking up for them. Especially praising this motherfucker. I'm gonna be really blunt about that video. It was just pretty much fucking biased. All he was doing is dick riding package to reviewer and just straight up victim blaming people. It doesn't really matter that the minor in the situation did shitty things at their end. They're still a grooming victim regardless. So yeah, no, I'm not gonna watch that video. Matter of fact, they could suck a dick.
Yeah, it came off as bitter and dismissive from the presentation. It didn't help that for basically all 3 points, she failed to elaborate and provide constructive feedback. How am I supposed to improve and know what's wrong exactly when you're so vague about serious issues like me invalidating and blaming victims? So naturally, I asked for elaboration on these glaring flaws that the video has in her comments. The response she originally gave sadly failed at helping the issue, instead adding even more vague and incoherent points to the equation. She even commented on my Blocky video prior to her Carno response, but the point she singled out there failed to make sense to me. Instead of any of those complaints broadcast in her video, she highlighted an implied double standard. Despite calling out Blocky for using ableist language, notably the R slur, Sav assumed I was okay with Box saying the same thing because I didn't call out his ableism, since Box did use such language in past videos. With all the other problems which my video had, why was that 1-minute snippet the flaw to comment about? It didn't help that Sav still didn't believe me when I told her I wasn't cool with Box saying such either, and for the record, I mentioned this exact thing thing in Sav's video when responding to her, and yet she repeated this exact point I already debunked twice to her, with the only difference now being an additional nugget which sounded even dumber than her original complaint. Between those weird priorities, overall vagueness, and many poor qualities shown in her work, I'll admit I did form a bias in the same way I had for Blocky. Somewhat fortunately, I did at least research Sav more when producing the original draft for my video, unfortunately still carrying a biased outlook. When my video dropped, I received a few comments from people who had to deal with Blocky and Sav, claiming harassment from both. And judging from how she handled the Carno response to start, who also commented on my video, I could certainly believe that. Anecdotes aren't a good means of determination though, so I checked more recent videos from the channel along with any responses I could find. It was stressful and eventually a waste of time, but I don't think it really mattered when my view on her was rigid from the beginning. The most eye-opening find though came from some callouts by the commentator Mushroom Girl. Honestly, it speaks to the dichotomy of this whole ordeal. While Sav embodied most of the worst tendencies of a moralist creeper critic, Mushroom Girl has the worst tendencies of a pro-fiction shipping weirdo. MG's most infamous now for her outspoken views on problematic fiction, made clear by her ragebait adjacent pro-shipping video. I'd prefer to discuss this as little as possible, but I was more accepting of her compared to Sav, at least with their feud. Forgiving MG's own controversies, some videos she made against Sav were a huge resource of info. So many points reaffirmed my concerns, some even mirroring the stuff she called out others for. Yes, including the ableism. Sav also had a reputation for promoting lies about MG herself in the past. I was gonna highlight the worst of these in my original response before that concept got shafted. Probably for the best, since much of this information does come from years old videos. However, I did find other unsavory critiques of her own. The most relevant was one she made about Julian Morero's critics like the Julian is a Bad Man group channel. This is relevant for being how Sav first called Carno out. Some arguments were justified, but others jumped to bold conclusions or amounted to ad hominem like before. I agree that those behind Julian is a Bad Man did a terrible job, and the actions from its members behind the scenes are worth investigating. There were just better ways for Sav to express those issues. To be fair, it's very unlikely Sav holds these videos up to current standards. The fact that all but the Julian one have been deleted suggests that. Although, it did make me think her attacks were a pattern of behavior once I found this out. Coincidentally, they're often directed at people or groups who criticize her. Despite all this, I wouldn't consider her to be a malicious person, rather somebody who has trouble controlling her emotions towards sensitive topics like the usual predator hunter stuff. Sav herself is open about being a victim of CSA, and her trauma likely affects her thinking. I feel sorry and don't blame her for getting angry. Hell, a lot of what she discusses are things she probably should be angry about. That all being said, this pattern was something I did grow to worry about with how much hype there was surrounding Carno's downfall in her own audience. Because apparently, predator hunting is like a sport. But anyway, not long after Sav's Carno response came out, Mushroom Girl made a commentary on it. She would do so from an outsider's perspective, without much knowledge of the situation at hand. It would definitely benefit by covering both sides, like I meant to. I, however, did leave a comment on her video, correcting a few things and providing additional context while still complimenting the video. I'm less favorable to the video now though, largely from this lack of research, but also her own reputation. It's funny how much her views on something barely related can sour her remaining work. But back to Sav, despite all odds, I eventually managed to get insight from her side. One thing that helped was that she made a much better video covering Carno's controversies last August. It even included a testimony from Noah, the one Carno gave the worst treatment. It's not a perfect video by any means, but it is beneficial to see the victim's perspective. Soon after, I was able to discuss things with her privately, along with Noah and Blocky. This actually helped me realize not just Blocky's issues with the video, but the ones Sav herself brought up. With my mind more open, pretty much all the issues she expressed became sound. My treatment between Blocky and Box, including their fans, were skewed in favor of the latter due to familiarity. Whatever extra info I had on Blocky was either inaccurate or desperate, with the focus on his imposter being both. And I've gone long enough on how tasteless my portrayal of Grime was, directly blaming this victim and sinking their reputation all due to distrust and meltdowns. I deserved the teardown Blocky himself did, and the graphic video treatment Grime gave me. And with my Blocky rant now taking the title of my most viewed video of this type, that gives me additional guilt. But hey, that's my fuck up. I own up to creating it. The garbage I put out in this video presented most of my negative traits. That's happened with past videos, some more blatantly, but its success and higher ambition do make this flub up harder to move past. It's why the Carno response took so long to get out of the oven, in part because of wavering interest in processing its flaws, but also the feeling I'm not qualified to speak on that matter when I severely botched my last. It's all a matter of reputation, and I don't have nearly enough faith in myself to not screw up again. Both that and an elevated aversion to overly negative news are reasons why I want to shift the channel around. It's not like the popular commentators are doing much better, so I'd rather leave this ship before it fully sinks. There is one figure from that video though who I don't think deserves an apology, and that's Will G. Even if some of my info wasn't accurate and should have been handled better in general, I am still very concerned about their relationship with Grime. While providing support for this victim is generally good, reminder that Will's in his early 20s and Grime's around 16, and while platonic, their relationship is pretty close. Now, Grime has claimed that he's seen no indication of Will being abusive towards him. Me, on the other hand, I'm not so confident about that. For the record, this is not about Will potentially twisting the victim's grooming case. Some of my suspicion is based on how strong their attachment is, but I'm not blaming Grime at all for this. Please do not use this as a means to insult Grime, since it's likely he couldn't control himself under the weight of trauma. It's why their friendship became as strong as it's been. Unfortunately, that comes with a few concerns. One thing with an unclear connection is that last year, Grime apparently drew essentially revenge porn out of a few boxes, which were posted publicly to the ED forums. While there's no proven link to Will G influencing this, there is one issue I do have. If you're genuine about wanting to keep Grime safe, you should probably try stopping them from drawing and posting such material, especially publicly. It's possible that Will G did attempt this, and that failed. I'm just saying that it's only adding more suspicion against them, given the age gap and their bond. But something I can speak more confidently on is how one of Will's attempts to expose Josh did more to incriminate himself. For context, Josh has a Newgrounds account, one which he's posted smut to. Adding to a series of similar claims, Will G asserted that Josh was exposing this material to minors. Keep in mind that this art was rated as adult over on that site, which is what any porn should be tagged as. The problem is, Will sent this allegation and one of those images to a guy named Jarosy, who is currently under 18. It was also allegedly sent by him on 2 Discord servers containing underage members. So as a stab against Josh, not only did it fail, but the one spreading it likely did such sin himself in the process. At best, it proves he's not smart enough at this call-out thing, and furthermore, it adds to my distrust of him protecting Grime. I feel sorry that he's possibly had his trust played with, due to both sharing a grudge against Josh and the Boxy crew. Hopefully he can find a better influence, at least with somebody less caught up in a vendetta that he puts above everyone else's safety. But beyond that ugly crap, let's look on the bright side. This year-long period I found to be a good exercise of personal growth, trying to rectify my worst failures during the production phases for both projects. It's why I'm not bashing myself up too much. I've shown noticeable development. Besides, I'm kinda used to lousing things up. It's inevitable after 10 years of doing YouTube. Speaking of which, continuing the self-critical theme, I'd like to reflect on videos which I later came to regret or did a mediocre job on. I still think there's more videos in my backlog I enjoy and hold up than ones I don't. Much to the perfectionist agony though, they can't all be winners. I guess spoilers, my Blocky rant will be on that list. Although I won't go in depth on it cause that's what this whole goddamn video was about. I do want to take a break from all that stress though, so that likely won't be what comes next. Chances are it'll be tonally opposite and much goofier. Some sunshine to come after the storm of gray. Regardless, I hope you at least understood all I had to say. Until next time, this is Bracket the Bing fan, spooting out. Nice video, Bracket, but you shit at TrackMania. Get good.